welcome to the Greenville Arts Council virtual wine tasting and cheese and charcuterie tasting. And Bland and Carl and I are going to walk through a few of our favorite cheeses and some that you have on your cheese boards at home tonight. So let's begin.
I'll start by first saying what cheeses and charcuterie we do have tonight. We start with Saint Angel from France. We have a Spanish Mahon, a French Saint Agur, a Spanish Manchgo, and a Cypress Grove goat with truffle. And as far as the meats, they are all from Italy: prosciutto, mortadella, and 2 salamis.
Delicious. All right. Shall we taste? Let's do it.
Yes.
Okay. I think we're going to start with some of the lighter cheeses that might go with a lighter white summer wine. Maybe one of the whites that we are offering is the summer. Is it which one?
You find this one.
Okay.
This New Zealand NC. That is I think it's
Sauvignon Blanc.
Sauvignon Blanc. That's quite delicious. Got a few little tastings.
We started before everyone else. This is a Saint Angel from France, which is a triple cream cheese. Delicious. Usually a great accompaniment is fruit. Lan, what do you think? We have a Mahon also, Mahon, which is a cow's milk cheese, right, Lan?
Let me check my notes here. Cow's milk,
Right.
produced on the Isle of Menorca in Spain. And no pun intended, we thought it was a little bland.
Is this for Bland?
That is for bland.
That's for Bland. Both of those are great. Are great accompanied with maybe a little fruit, a little drizzle of balsamic, even with dried fruits. They are. The triple cream is very much like butter. I love it served with pear or dried fruit. These are dried figs. They're great spread on that. We have a little dried. We have some fresh apple, Honeycrisp apple, and pear.
We also found that Bland and I decided that the Saint Angel would be great over bread with some of the fig jam just spread on it, and eat that at even breakfast or dessert.
So, all right.
Let's talk about the Manchego for a second, because I thought this was such an interesting little thing. The Manchego is put up in reed baskets, and if y'all could get close to the rind, or I can get up and show it to you, you can see the, pass me that, I don't want to be too uncivilized, the imprint that the basket makes on the cheese, and it's one of the ways you can tell that it is Manchego. And there are 4 different versions of Manchego, and it all to do with age. We don't get the really young ones in this country, but we do get the last 3 ages, and they get drier and I think more pungent with age.
And this, if it were older than this, it would actually crumble on those.
It's delicious. It is served throughout the entirety of Spain. Almost everywhere you go in Spain, you will be offered Manchego and perhaps Spanish ham, which is either Iberico ham or Serrano ham. And it's delicious. It's very nutty. It's really aromatic, and it's delicious.
We found with, as you can see, the number of glasses we have in front of us, that it was more fun experimenting with the wines and with the cheeses and with the meats and the olives and dried fruits and honey and jam, just to decide what you felt would taste best, because some of our expectations actually were quite different once we started tasting it all together. And I think that's the fun of the evening, is to play with your food.
Yes. We were anticipating that the blue and this cheese on the end, that
The
comes
goat.
from the goat, and truffle, which is quite strong. But even though it is quite strong, we liked it with some of the lighter wines. And I think that just goes with Carl's point that you should experiment. And it's really been fun to have 5 glasses and try little bits with different wines.
Well, I particularly picked this goat because so many goats, I was saying earlier, are so tart or
Sour.
uh
A
huh,
little sour.
and this with the truffle in it gave it an earthy taste, which makes it a stronger taste. But I thought it would go well with reds. But I'm surprised that it goes. The Sauvignon Blanc, it's nice with it also. So that's part of the experience, is to try these cheeses with the different wines and see what you feel pairs the best.
I thought that the truffle goat cheese was particularly good spread on a pear slice or with a piece of fig. It's like it counterbalanced the strong flavor of the earthiness. And I really did like it with a lighter wine, and thought that I would really like an earthier cheese with a heavier wine, but it was great with a lighter wine. So it is fun to just dabble with all the different things on your tray and play with it.
And I think the Manchego with the saltiness went with everything. We just absolutely love that with the meats, all the wines. The Stilton, I think, more with the fruit, would you say?
Mm-hmm. It was
To balance it.
And the other thing that I'd like to mention is crackers. When you're eating these really strong cheeses, if you have a real flavored cracker, sometimes those things can fight. And that's when the delicious French bread and a big spread of any cheese is just so good. And these little plain crackers.
Well, that's what I picked. These crackers are just a simple hard cracker with a little sea salt, because I thought that they would not compete with the cheese at all.
Why don't you say a little bit about the charcuterie, the meats, because the meats have an enormous fat content, which obviously the cheese has an enormous fat content also. I, once again, love to pair some of the meat with fruit also, as opposed to pairing the meat with a piece of cheese.
Well, especially the two cheeses at that end are more buttery and fatter anyway, so you almost need these stronger cheeses, or with the prosciutto with the dried figs.
It's really great to wrap a little prosciutto around a fig or a piece of pear or something. You don't necessarily have to have a piece of meat with a cheese and a cracker. I think the point is, as Carl said earlier, play with it all and play with the wine and just enjoy it.
Hi, and welcome to the Greenville Arts Council Wine and Charcuterie Tasting. My name is Lindsay Evans. I'm a certified sommelier from Seattle, Washington, and I'm really excited to be taking you all through the wines and food pairings that we have today. Before we get going, though, I would like to recognize Chili's Liquor and the Pantry for their contribution to today's tastings. Before we get going, I want to let you know there's a couple different ways you can use this video. You could certainly watch it straight through and then dive into the food and cheese pairing and wine pairing on your own. Or if you want to go wine by wine with me, feel free to do so. You may want to occasionally hit the pause button if you're really enjoying a particular glass of wine, and then resume when you're ready to move on to the next wine. For the tasting order today, we're going to do a very similar order to what we would do in a professional wine tasting, where we start with the wines that are more delicate, lighter in body, and slowly proceed through to the wines as that they get richer, heavier, and more full-bodied, and ending with the most full-bodied wines. The reason we do this is because we don't want to overwhelm our taste buds, our olfactory senses, with the really powerful, heavy, deep, rich aromas of, say, a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Zinfandel before we taste a really light, delicate rosé, because we might just not be able to taste too much in that case. The first wine we're going to taste today is the Summer Rosé from the Central Coast region of California. This is a wine that is a blend of two red wine grapes, Grenache and Syrah, and it has very delicate, crisp, refreshing aromas from the stone fruit family, like peaches and apricots, and also the melon family, so think honeydew and cantaloupe melon. This wine also has a zippy, refreshing acid on the finish, and that makes it a wonderful pairing with a lot of different foods, huge variety. So feel free to go ahead and try a lot of things on your charcuterie board at this point, but be sure to leave some of each item, because we will want to get more specific with some of the later pairings as we go through the tasting. And while you're tasting, know that rosé isn't just a great summer wine, it's a fantastic food pairing year-round. So from the first spring vegetables you pick out of your garden, right on up through a rich Thanksgiving dinner, rosé is a wonderful wine to accompany all those types of foods. So if you're ever in a bind and you need to grab a wine real quickly to take to a dinner or a party, not sure what they're going to be serving, rosé is a great go-to for you. And just note that also, while this particular rosé has a dry finish, if you are going to be eating foods with a lot of sugar and sweetness, possibly some barbecue, things like that, things with brown sugar in the recipe, you might want to ask for an off-dry rosé. So if you're ready to move on, we'll go ahead and grab the Santa Margherita Pinot Grigio. If you're not ready, go ahead and hit the pause button now and finish your rosé, and then resume when you're ready to move on. But for those of you who are moving on, we're doing the Santa Margherita Pinot Grigio. This is from the Valdadige region of Italy, which is a large region that encompasses the Alto Adige, Trentino, and the Veneto. And it's a river valley that runs all the way from the northernmost part of Italy by the Austrian border all the way out to the ocean right by just south of Venice. And Pinot Grigio in other parts of the world is often called Pinot Gris, but it's the same exact grape. And why we're going to start with this wine next is it's a very neutral, I don't want to say bland because that has some bad connotations, but a neutral and inoffensive type of wine. It's not going to have any really strong, overpowering flavors that someone might dislike, which makes it a great wine also for a variety of different foods. And I think a wonderful pairing for this wine would be the Manchego cheese. Manchego cheese, as you know, it probably is also one of these cheeses that is very appealing to a broad audience of people. It doesn't have any ridiculously pungent aromas or ultra strong flavors. So it's got a huge variety of flavors though. Things like nuttiness, some hazelnuts, even some chocolatey tones. It's got a really nice creaminess and a saltiness, because it is a hard cheese after all. So the Pinot Grigio is going to be a wonderful pairing because it's not going to overwhelm these delicate flavors of the Manchego cheese. The next one in our tasting is going to be the Locations New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs are known for having much bolder aromas than both Pinot Grigios and most rosés. They are going to have very strong citrus aromas of things like gooseberry and grapefruit. They're going to have herbal aromas of things like lemongrass, and they're even going to have some vegetal aromas, very much akin to green bell pepper and jalapeno. So they also have this wonderful zippy acidity and a sort of tanginess on the finish. And the tanginess is exactly what's going to lead us into our food pairing. We're going to visit the Cypress Grove goat cheese on this one. And goat cheese is also a cheese that is known for having a sort of tanginess. And you'll see that as you take a little bite of the goat cheese and you have a sip of the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, the tanginess, they really complement each other, and they sort of also cancel each other out so that you can experience the periphery flavors of the cheese and the wine. Now, an interesting side story about this wine is that it is a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, but it's actually made in the United States. And how they do that, Dave Finney, the winemaker, for famous wines like The Prisoner and now the Orange Swift line of wines and his newest project, Locations. With Locations, he actually buys grapes from an international region. He has the grapes crushed and pressed, and the juice bled off into bags that are sealed. He then ships the juice over to his winery in the United States and then makes an international wine from international grapes at his U.S. winery. So it is technically a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, it just happened to have been made in the United States. The final white wine in our flight tonight is going to be the Quilt Chardonnay from Napa. Now, Chardonnay, like Pinot Grigio, also starts off as a neutral grape with sort of very bland flavors. But the Quilt Chardonnay from Napa is anything but. And the reason is because this sort of neutral blank canvas that Chardonnay provides as a grape allows the winemaker to enhance the wine with a lot of winemaking skills that add flavors to the wine, such as the use of new oak barrels and malolactic fermentation. So let's talk about these for a quick second. When you age a Chardonnay in new oak barrels, it's going to pick up very strong flavors and aromas of baking spice, so things like clove and cinnamon, also vanilla, and even some smoke and toasty notes. And then when you do a malolactic fermentation on a white wine, that converts the really tart, Granny Smith type of malic acids into the softer lactic acids that we often find in milk. And so you end up with a wine that's much creamier, much more buttery. It actually has some buttery aromas as well. And that's going to lead us into our food pairing. We're going to pair this wine with the Saint Angel triple cream cheese. And triple cream is known for being really, really rich cheese. It's like, I think, 2 or 3 levels richer than regular table butter. And so for that wine, for that cheese, you're going to need a wine that has a really rich body to match that cheese. And so I think when you try these two side by side, you'll see why we have paired them together. And if you don't, you can always go back and try one of the leaner wines, like the Pinot Grigio, and take a bite of the Saint Angel. And you'll see that the Saint Angel richness almost overwhelms like the Pinot Grigio or the Rosé. While you're enjoying the wonderful pairing of the Napa Chardonnay with the very rich triple cream cheese, let's talk briefly about the name of this wine because it's a really fantastic wine. Quilt is a reference to the patchwork appearance of the vineyards. So when you're flying over in a helicopter or a plane and you look down, the vineyards literally look like a patchwork or like a quilt of different little pieces of land patched together. And so it's just like a cheeky little reference to that site. The first red wine of our flight tonight is going to be the Wright Cellars Pinot Noir, that's the grape, from Willamette Valley in Oregon. Now, Willamette Valley is actually only a 3-hour drive from Seattle, so I have been there a couple times myself, and it's a wonderful area. It's particularly well suited for Pinot Noir because it's very close to the coast, yet there is a small coastal mountain range that protects the slightly in the Willamette Valley from the the harsh winds and immediate weather effects, but that valley is close enough to the ocean where it keeps the valley from getting too warm. The cooling effect of the proximity to water keeps the valley from getting too warm, and that protects the delicate skin of the Pinot Noir grape, allowing it to ripen without too much heat. Now on the flavor side, Pinot Noir is going to have really bright, fresh flavors and aromas. When you smell this wine, you're going to get a lot of really fresh red berry fruits, and even some herbal notes of sassafras and cola. And Pinot Noirs are much lighter bodied red. They also have a pretty decent amount of acidity at the end, and occasionally some new oak as well, as in this wine. And so that's going to add in a touch of those vanilla and baking spices that we saw earlier in the Chardonnay. One of the great pairings for this wine is going to be that Cypress Grove goat cheese, because again, goat cheese is on the lighter side. We don't want to overwhelm the light body of the Pinot Noir. And those wonderful fresh red berry fruits, ranging from the tart end of cranberry and pomegranate through to the ripe cherry and even some strawberry and raspberry. We want those to really shine in this wine. For those of you who have been eager to move on to the meat offerings in the charcuterie plate, this next wine is going to be a perfect pairing. We're going to look at the Villadoria Rosso from Piedmont, Italy. Now, this wine is a blend of two different native Italian varieties from the Piedmont region, the Barbera grape and the Dolcetto grape. Barbera is a ruby-colored wine with really bright, fresh cherry aromas and flavors and a really strong core of acidity. Dolcetto is a really deep, dark, inky-colored wine with dark black fruit and blue fruit aromas, things like blackberries and blueberries. And Dolcetto is high in tannins. Now, acid is the stuff that makes your mouth water when you're done taking a sip, and tannins are the things that make your mouth dry after you're done taking a sip. On their own, either of these varieties might be a bit too much without food, but blended together, they not only make a great food wine, but they also make a wine that's fun to drink on its own. This wine, very similar to the Pinot Noir, is going to have really bright and fresh aromas of red berry fruits. We're going to get a little bit of those red cherries from the Barbera. We're also going to get some of the darker black fruits from the Dolcetto. And the acid and the tannin in this wine are going to really complement those fattier salumis and other deli meats on your charcuterie plate in front of you. And you'll find that maybe on its own, when you take a sip, some of those acids and tannins are a little too harsh, but when you follow it with a little piece of food, something about the synergy of the acids and tannins with a fat elevates both the meat and the wine. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now on the home stretch of the tasting, the final two red wines of the night. These are indeed going to be much more fuller bodied, more dense, more rich. The first of the two wines is going to be the Bonanza Cabernet Sauvignon from California. Cabernet Sauvignon is going to have, like I said, that deep, dense, dark, fruited flavors. For people that are a little bit more in tune to the specifics, you're going to notice a lot of blackberry and cassis, also known as black currant flavors. And the richness of this wine in particular is going to call for a richer flavored pairing. And so I'm going to look over to the Agur blue cheese on the plate. Blue cheese obviously has some very rich, very bold flavors and aromas, and you're going to need that to sort of stand up and complement this full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignon. While you're enjoying this pairing, the Cabernet Sauvignon and then the final Zinfandel that we're going to have also work equally well with one of the cheeses which is not present today, cheddar cheese, especially if you get an aged, saltier cheddar cheese. And then, of course, any of the heartier meat dishes, beef stews, lamb, grilled steak, any of those types of heavier weighted dishes or bolder, gamier meat dishes are going to work wonderfully with full-body red wines. Saldo, Zinfandel, our final red wine of the night, going to be the richest, also the highest in alcohol, clocking in at 15.5%. So this is going to be a really full-bodied, almost an over-the-top, almost desserty type of wine. Now, it's not going to have a lot of sugar like a dessert wine would have, but it's certainly going to have the richness. And so you can do anything from the cheddar cheese that I mentioned just a minute ago to the blue cheese. You can also go with dark chocolate, would work well for this. A whole assortment of rich meats and gamier meats would be a great pairing with Zinfandel. Even barbecue, hamburgers. Zinfandel just has these really bold flavors that can stand up to other strongly flavored dishes. While you're enjoying this pairing, one thing to note is that this is also labeled as a California wine. The reason they do that is because the old vine Zinfandels, vineyards that are kind of scattered throughout California, to put them all together into one great wine, you need to take wine from multiple different regions. Wherever you can find these gnarly old vines that sometimes are, in some cases, up to 100 years old. And so you need to be able to take from different regions to create this wonderful, exciting blend of California Zinfandel. And Zinfandel is also one of California's, one of the great wines that really shines in the California landscape. And now we are at the conclusion of the tasting. It has been a wonderful experience and a pleasure to participate, even though we couldn't all do this in person. Again, I would like to thank Chili's Liquor and the Pantry for helping to make this tasting possible. And one more time, I would also like to thank the Greenville Arts Council for putting together this wonderful wine and charcuterie tasting. And I hope you all enjoyed it and had a wonderful time.